What's up, guys? Jake back here with the Killing Joke Studios and Mixing with Metal. Today, I have something for you that can really help your mixes in terms of your drums if you're maybe struggling in that area or maybe struggling with opening up your mixes a little bit. What I'm going to talk about today is creating depth in your mixes, specifically in the drums, considering they take up such a wide range in your mixes as far as being in the front and being in the back. Before we get into all of that, though, I just want you to go ahead and listen to this drum mix to see where we're at. Awesome. Sounds pretty good. So what I'm going to explain today is how I have that depth effect in the drums. And I'll go ahead and bypass it and bring it back in so you can hear it in a second here. But before I do that, I want to go ahead and explain why this is so important in our mixes. So we have to understand how we should mix, right? The goal is to have a mix that sounds three-dimensional. So those three dimensions would be right and left, top and bottom, and forward and back. Now, the right and left is pretty easy to achieve. You just achieve it by panning. Top and bottom really isn't that difficult to achieve as long as you get your EQ right and you understand EQ really good. But the one that's really difficult is forward and back. Yes, we can add a reverb, or yes, we can compress the snot out of something so it's brought forward or brought back with the reverb. But it's a little bit difficult to make it sound cohesive or coherent in our song, as opposed to just being something that sounds like a lot of reverb or something that's way too up in your face. So how do we do that? Well, what I'm using is the stereo room or ambience microphones that came with these drums. And I'm also using some parallel compression to achieve that. So let me go ahead and bypass those and bring those back in, and then I'll explain to you what I'm doing on the individual tracks. Awesome. You should notice a pretty large difference in terms of depth when those are out and when those are back in. Now, I do understand there's a slight volume difference, but regardless of that, there still is, in terms of depth, a huge change in the drums. So let's jump in and see what I'm doing here. So I'm going to go over the ambience track first. I'm going to go ahead and bypass my parallel drum compression. First thing I have in this ambience track is a crazy amount of EQ. So what my goal is here is to really just get some body from the kit. I'm not worried about cymbals. I'm not worried about high-end stuff. This is more of an EQ thing. Noticing that stuff that's going to be further away in my mix is not going to have a lot of top end. It's going to have more low end in it. In terms of the drums, there's not going to be a whole lot of top. The top is going to come from the stuff that's close, the crack of the snare, the cymbals, things like that, things that are close and up in your face. But the ambient stuff, the stuff that's adding depth, is rolling off some top end. So I rolled off a ton of top end here, and I have some squiggles and stuff, which probably don't really matter in the grand scheme of things. I just grab and adjust to my ear's taste and let it be. The thing that is noticeable is probably this dip around 500, where there's quite a bit of cardboardy kind of sounding frequencies, and then around 120 because there was this weird kind of kick flubbiness, if that's a word, this kind of flub in the kick that I didn't like, and I want to just dip a little bit of that out. So let me go ahead and bypass that on the ambience track and bring it back in. Cool. It's rolling off a ton of top end. Where you're really going to hear this come alive, though, is in my next plugin, which is the CLA 76 from Waves. If you're saying, Jake, I don't have the CLA 76 from Waves, I can't afford that, you can achieve this with your stock compressor. And even Pro Tools comes with an 1176 modeler. Is it going to be as quick as this? Probably not. But can you do it? Absolutely. So let's go ahead and bring that in from bypassed. So that's where some of that volume boost is coming from, is this compressor. Again, not really too worried about it because, as you can see, I am absolutely compressing the snot out of this. Attack set to lowest, release set to lowest, and the ratio set, the button, all in button set on the 1176. Shaving off as much as 10 or 11 decibels easy. Really trying to just completely squash the dynamics in this. And what this is doing is it's bringing up all of that ambience and the drum sound. The reason I have the attack set so fast is because I want to kill transients. I don't want this to be I don't want this to be right up in your face. I want this to sound distant. And so right when there's any sort of sign of transient, I want that 1176 completely hitting it. I want it to hit as fast as it can. And that's really helping do that. The release I had set slow as possible. Normally, I start with a little bit slower release to bring out that ambience a little bit more. But in this case, the song is so fast that a faster release sounded better in the song. So I used a faster release. The attack, I generally set low. The release, play with it depending on the song. So the only other thing I have on this ambience track is some saturation, which is Waves NLS, set to the Neve model, and I'm driving it pretty hard and attenuating a little bit with the output. Let me bring that in for you. Just adding a little bit of coloration, some saturation to it to bring a little bit more vibe to the ambience tracks because they sounded a little dull with just the processing that was before. And if you haven't used NLS or used any sort of harmonic saturation on your drums, that can really help a lot. If you see here all these ends on my drums, these are all instances of Waves NLS, and they really do help add some saturation to your drums and give them a little bit more vibe. So with just the ambience track and the rest of the drums, let me go ahead and mute that and then bring it back in. Subtle, but it's there for sure. Now the big one is this drum compression, this parallel drum compression. So let me go ahead and just show you how the drum compression sounds on its own. Super, super crushed. And the way I achieved that was actually a pretty cool plugin that I got from Sound Toys during their they have a pay what you want thing that they do during the holiday seasons, and I was able to get this plugin for pretty cheap while donating to a good cause. But this is their Devil Lock, and this is the little Devil Lock, I guess it is. It just has 2 knobs on it, and it absolutely destroys anything that you put it on, which means it is perfect for parallel compression. So it has a crush knob where it's completely obliterating it with compression, and then a crunch knob where it brings in a little bit of distortion. So you're gonna hear a huge difference, but let me go ahead and bypass that and I'll bring it in. Super pumpy, super crazy, a little bit too crazy, in fact. And what I did is went ahead and loaded up the Slick EQ here. I just did a video on the Slick EQ and why I would use it as opposed to something like the Pro Q2. So if you haven't checked that out, make sure you go and check that out. The link is in the description. But what I'm doing here is I'm rolling off some top end. So I have a high shelf set to -4 decibels, around 2K. And then I'm also dipping out some 1.3 here because it just sounded a little bit nasty and I wanted to dip it out. So let me go ahead and bypass that and I'll bring that back in. Perfect, right? Just to attenuate those cymbals just a little bit because they were getting a little out of control with this absolutely insane plugin from Sound Toys. I start laughing because this thing just I have it set to 1 on the compression and not even 2 on the crunch, and it's doing that much. Don't even, if you get this plugin, cranking it to 10 is just unusable. It is so crazy. I love plugins that you can absolutely push super, super far. So that's what I'm doing on the drum compression. So one more time, let me go ahead and take out the parallel drum compression and take out the ambience and bring them back in for you. No reverbs, nothing like that, but it almost simulates a reverb, and it's a really cool thing. You can add depth to your mix. So what I would suggest to you is, if you're tracking drums yourself, try and put a stereo pair of mics in your room. It can even be cheap mics if you can't afford more expensive mics, and just try it, because at the end of the day, you can get some really good sounds with it. You can just throw up some cheap condensers in the end of your room just to see what it sounds like and process it like this, and it will help your mixes. I can't see, even with cheap microphones, it hurting your mixes. And the drum compression is just simple. Send a copy of your drums, compress the snot out of it, and then EQ to taste. And this will really help your drums sit and be a little bit more three-dimensional in your mix. Hope this helped, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you head over to the Facebook page or head over to the website and check out everything we have to offer at the Killing Joke Studios, and also with Mixing with Metal. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Make sure to leave a comment below to let me know what you thought about this, to see if it helped you, and make sure you like and subscribe. Thanks.